politics, it's quite possible that entrepreneurs relief will be restricted going forward. And certainly if there's a change in government, I think we could see some changes. What do you think, Carly?
I completely agree. I think that the latest HMRC figures, January 19, stating that £2.4 billion in tax was saved because of the relief, is quite an eye-opener, and I think that any government that does come in the future is going to have to really justify the saving and whether it's actually benefiting UK businesses the way it was intended to. I know that the Office of Tax Simplification has looked into it and has stated that they don't believe it is being used the way necessarily it was intended to. The reasoning behind the relief is that it's going to benefit UK businesses and encourage entrepreneurs to set up in the UK, and there's going to really have to be a justification that is happening, I think, going forwards.
I think you're right. I think a 10% tax rate on 10 million of gains is very generous, and perhaps actually more generous than was intended at the outset. So I think we can't assume that it's going to stay as it is forever. With that in mind, anyone considering a business sale in the future needs to start preparing, and the earlier the better. That's not to say we should cause concern or alarm. It's unlikely the government's going to do anything to discourage entrepreneurs or do anything significant to discourage entrepreneurial business in the UK. Having said that, if we see the lifetime limit drop, for example, which is quite possible, some quite simple planning would allow people to restructure their business. So, for example, their spouse could get relief as well on retirement. As ever, the key is taking advice as early as possible.
So, with significant uncertainty as to the future of the relief, there's very sort of proactive pieces of advice that we can give clients that are in sort of quite specific situations or generally are considering something in the future. So one client I met with recently is considering selling their business. They operate as a limited company, but it would also apply to people in partnership, for instance. And as part of that sale, they're interested in keeping their premises just to guarantee some rental income for the next couple of years until they can start drawing on their pension. So obviously, you'll know that you can get entrepreneurship relief on the sale of that premises now in conjunction with the business. But when they're thinking of selling the business, perhaps in 5 years' time, that's not going to be available. So the advice we've given them is to crystallise that gain now and pay the tax at 10% now on that premises to give them the rebasing of that property. So when they do sell in 5 years' time, they're not going to get entrepreneurship relief. There's obviously going to be a much smaller gain at that point due to having paid 10% tax on the historical gain.
That's a really good point, actually. I think it's often forgotten that this kind of thing's available. Can be achieved really simply, just by settling the property, in this case anyway, onto a trust for yourself.
Yeah.
Another really good example of how someone can accelerate or bring forward a claim to entrepreneurs relief is perhaps where they sell their business. They might sell their business and have a large chunk of the consideration on deferred terms, perhaps using loan notes. Now at the moment they might be in a position where they can claim entrepreneurs relief on the redemption of those loan notes. But if the rules change, that relief might not be available in the future. What they can do is elect now into entrepreneurs relief, albeit it means they're paying their tax early, but they'll be paying the tax at the 10% rate.
Yeah, so another example would be a farming partnership who we're working with has recently sold some land for development, so they've obviously got significant proceeds. Options being, as you'll know, is to roll over into new farm assets, farmland for instance, or to pay 20% capital gains tax. So following various discussions, we've actually looked at the bigger picture, and alongside their succession planning, we've structured it so that the old generation are now going to withdraw from the business and we're going to pay the 10% tax rate, allowing the younger generations to come in and use that cash, 90% of the proceeds, use that cash to diversify into other enterprises within the farming trade.
That's a really good option actually, and I suppose people also need to be aware they don't need to withdraw completely.
No.
You only need to partly withdraw and still achieve that same tax position.
Definitely. So hopefully those examples provide a broad spectrum of how the relief can be used currently in its current form. So the key really is to getting in touch and having that initial chat, isn't it?
Yes, totally agree with you, Carly.